Hey everybody, it is Thursday, April 3rd, 2025. Yesterday was Liberation Day, and you may be watching this on Wednesday. But it was Liberation Day, and it wasn't the shocker that many people had predicted. It wasn't the ultimate stock market collapse or crash. There was a decline in stocks, especially after market hours, after trading hours, with the Dow down about 1,000 points. And we've got 10% on all imports worldwide. We've got bigger tariffs on other countries, like 20% on the EU, 24% on Japan, 26% on India, 34% on China, 46% on Vietnam, and then some other ones are even crazier. Some interesting news, though, that some uninhabited islands got tariffs put on them. So when they said the world, he wasn't kidding. It's uninhabited islands as well. And I wonder if it was the island that from the show Castaway, from the movie Castaway. Joking. Blowing up the world system will have consequences. That's what the Wall Street Journal says. So there's no shortage of media articles and news out there predicting dire consequences, predicting the worst, right? And I've always said here, prepare for the worst. Chances are things aren't going to blow up, but every once in a while, every 10, 15 years, you do see some catastrophic market-changing event. And will this lead to a catastrophic situation where we have prices already high, price levels are already high, and now we throw in tariffs? The best time to put tariffs on would have been right after coming out of the financial crisis. Prices were low. Remember, home prices came down. The cost of living came down. Cost of a lot of things came down. One, because the banks were very restrictive on their lending for a period, and also people were very just kind of freaked out, and a lot of job losses. A lot of things led to that. That would have been the perfect time for tariffs. Prices were low for that moment, but now they reinflated the bubble, low interest rates, helicopter money, loosened up the lending again. Of course, debt climbed nonstop since then, so we've seen price levels just remain high. And until the helicopter money gets shut off, this is not going to stop. And now you're adding fuel to the fire with the tariffs. So it's going to be very interesting. It could be even scary and frightening, very frightening for the people that weren't prepared, for the people already on a strict budget, living paycheck to paycheck, which we know the paycheck to paycheck crowd is most of the American people, over 70%, unfortunately. And what did we learn just a few weeks ago? We learned that about half of the spending that's happening in the economy was either federal or the top 10%. Right? Federal or the top 10% made up over half of spending. So when they say everybody's spending money, people spent more money, remember, it's not just the people, it's not the average person, it's mostly the top 10% and federal spending, right? So that's what's looked at as economic growth, folks. So that's kind of I think the shade that's pulled down in front of people's eyes. They don't really understand how these numbers are even brought up, how they're even calculated. Right, little business news, folks. We've got TikTok looking to get bought out, and they're being bid on by Amazon and even the OnlyFans director. Oh no, the OnlyFans founder of OnlyFans. That's going to be interesting to see how that works out there. So there's been this interest in TikTok either being banned or being bought out. And I'm afraid of what happens when these platforms get bought out, because it's all going to be based on who buys it, what their views are. Because we know that most people aren't fair, right? Most people are either slanted in one side or another. They belong to one party or another, so their views are going to be extreme. Right? I think most people on this channel probably aren't extreme one way or the other, left or right. I think you probably have, okay, maybe you agree with a little bit on this side, a little bit on that side, or maybe a lot on that side and some on that side. But I've never met anyone personally that believes everything on one side, like all the talking points on the one side or the other side. So that's kind of the scary thing. Everybody's so divided. You wonder who's buying up these platforms and what their views are going to be and how they're going to allow the platform to function with their personal views. Now, this whole economic situation, the economic picture, can go a number of ways. And it could be inflationary, which if banks still allow people to borrow more money, if loans are not restricted, and if they're actually loosened, you could see inflation still rise and economic growth rise. Because remember, spending is looked at as economic growth. So if they can keep the banks loaning out money, they can keep this economy looking like it's growing, because as long as people can borrow money, and most spending is borrowed money now, so they can keep it look like it's growing, if banks tighten up the lending, it can look like the economy is retracting, and it could look like a severe recession, if not a depression, right? And nobody knows exactly what's going to happen with the lending, but that's kind of the backbone of this whole economy. It's consumer spending, and the bulk of it is the top 10% with the federal spending. So if they choke federal spending, which they're saying they're doing, but we're really not seeing that because we look at the debt accumulation, the debt levels, the national debt is rising, and not only rising, it's accelerating still. So something's not adding up. They're saying that we've cut all these agencies and we stopped all the spending, but it looks like a big scam so far, folks. The debt is still rising rapidly, hasn't slowed down, and in fact, it looks like it may have accelerated a little bit. All right, and I've said on this channel for years that the idea of paying down the national debt, it's a joke. It's impossible. You cannot cut enough to pay off this debt at this point. 36-something trillion dollars is impossible. But for someone to go out there and pretend that it's possible, I guess they got a lot of people fooled into thinking that it's actually possible. And even if you did pay down the debt, will it help the average person? Will it help the average 9-to-5 person working? Maybe one, maybe two jobs, maybe two jobs and a side hustle just to get by. It's very unlikely, right? These cuts, including the tax cuts that we had a few years ago, corporate tax cuts, didn't trickle down to the consumer, right? Any sort of wealth or extra money usually stays at the top, right? Now, some companies have to pay higher wages just to keep everybody from leaving, right? To keep people from protesting on the sidewalk and holding up signs. So yes, there are some wage increases, but when you see the debt levels, we know that the wages are not keeping up with the cost of living. And at this point here, we still have most people priced out of the housing market. And then when you look at rents are still high. We haven't seen a big correction in rents either. And, of course, we're only a couple months into the administration. There's people out there telling me you need to wait. Things are going to get better. I agree. Ultimately, things are going to get better. But I think it could be even beyond 4 years before we start seeing things get better. I think this entire next 4-year stretch could be just cumulative, getting worse, things getting more expensive, cost of living getting worse, more people living paycheck to paycheck. I wouldn't be surprised to see that 70% number go to 75, 80% just in the next couple of years. And I wouldn't be surprised to see the housing market go up higher. You have a lot of materials now being tariffed. About 80% of our certain lumber comes in from Canada, not all lumber, but certain types of soft lumber, especially for construction in homes. So it'd be very surprising if we see any sort of declining or drop in the cost of living. And of course, they'll pick out one or two things that prices came down, and they'll say, look at this, look at that. But overall, I mean, I would like to hear your thoughts. I don't see costs coming down. I don't see things getting easier for the average person. And one of the biggest areas I think is going to be used vehicles. We haven't seen used vehicles come down to where they were at prior to the health crisis in 2020. They came down maybe about 30% from the total rise that we saw since 2020. Not 30% total, but just 30% from the rise. And a 25% tariff now on all imports globally. Mostly it's going to affect new cars, of course, but what happens when the cost of new cars goes up, more people are going to be looking at used cars. And so of course, that's going to have a upward price trajectory on used cars, right? Because you're going to shift demand from new to used because the higher prices over here, and now you're going to see higher prices over there. So even used cars, I think the prices are going to be affected by this. And I'll be shocked if prices continue to go down over the past ever since 2022, when we saw the peak in vehicle prices, we started seeing prices come down. Of course, there were little upticks here and there, but overall it was downward trend. And I'll be shocked if we see the further downward trend. I think it's going to be an upward trend here going forward if these tariffs stick. And who knows, with this administration, all the things that have been done so far have been pretty rapid, right? So they could announce, who knows, next week, next month, that there's going to be changes in the tariffs based on negotiations, based on what other countries, how they responded, and things like that here. So it's just something we'll have to keep an eye on day to day. Now, still on the housing market, the National Association of Home Builders estimates that only about 10% of building materials used in residential construction are imported, right? So it's not as dire as that 80% number for certain types of lumber from Canada. They go on to quote here out of Realtor, U.S. faces a supply gap of nearly 4 million homes, and the only long-term solutions to this problem is to build them. Now, that's another thing too. When the housing bubble went bust, there was severe overbuilding in the mid-2000s going into 2006, 2007, 2008. And that was one of the pins. There were several pins that broke the bubble at the same time when the housing bubble finally deflated. So we're not seeing that pin now with overbuilding. We're not seeing overbuilding. We are seeing a high level, the highest level since the housing bust in new homes. But remember, new homes are only about, I believe it's about 15% of all homes sold. So that's not going to be a game changer having a 15-year high in used homes on the market. It's not going to be a game changer at all. It's going to be more inflationary, folks. So even Realtor is coming out and saying it's not going to be a big correction in the housing market. And of course, they have an interest in always saying home prices are going to go up. But so far, I mean, they've been right. There's exceptions here and there. Some cities actually came down. But we're overall, if you look at the nation, we're going up higher year over year every year that we look at it. All right, but back over to the used vehicle market for just a minute here. Remember, we're at all-time high car loan default levels, and banks are still not tightening the lending, right? So that tells you what's going on right now in the banking world, in the world of endless amounts of money that can be created at the click of a mouse. Even the banks are doing it. It's not the central bank. It's the banks are doing it. We also see central banks around the world buying gold with the money that they can just print, buying up tons of gold. So, of course, you're going to see gold continue to go up. We may see a pullback here and there, but over 3,000 here was what we had said even 2-3 years ago. I was surprised it didn't hit even higher. I thought by now it would be like 3,500 to 4,000. And as I'm reading this right now, it's gold 3,175. Oil just under $70. So we started to see some relief at the gas pump, but then it's not game changing as far as the change in the price of gas. I mean, if you're someone that really drives a lot, it could be a game changer. But for most people, it's just a little bit of help compared to the overall other costs that are going up. It's not really much of help at all. So myself and those of us that decided to kind of sit on the sidelines here as far as investing goes, and a little bit of a cash heavy position right now for I think a lot of you and myself as well. For those that invest, and of course, some people are here just for the news. I understand that you made it clear that you don't invest, many of you, and that's fine. I mean, some people are just sitting back watching the show. Other people are seriously concerned about if they don't invest, that they're going to be pulled under the wheel of this cost of living nightmare. So you've got to. Some people just have to invest, otherwise, their regular job and their income is just not going to cut it. So there are some people really, really looking at ways to try to make money out of this. And I have said my position here many times over the past 6 to 12 months when all this uncertainty was on the horizon. We saw all this coming, right? With November, this election, and what was going to happen, because drastically different views with the different parties here. And we are seeing what's unfolding right now. And I continue to say that we're going to see more volatility, more weakness in the stock market because of the cuts, right? Cost of living, not so much. The stock market, I think we could see some pretty big declines and some pretty big drops going forward. Now, if the declines in the stock market are big enough, that could bleed over into the overall economy. It could bleed over in consumer spending. Look at this stat out here that 401ks are being pummeled right now. Most people didn't even know how to brace their 401k retirement accounts for any sort of stock market downturn. And some people don't care. Some people just wait the downturns out because they know that ultimately it's going to go back up to all-time highs, which is true. If you look back even over the past 100 years, every stock market downturn or correction or even a crash has been followed up by all-time highs. Now, sometimes it took many years. Sometimes it took 5-10 years to get out of it, like the Great Depression. Sometimes it took less than 6 months to get out of it, like 2020 with the huge crash. They came in with so much helicopter money, they pumped it up to new all-time highs in a matter of months. But I can see the strategy of just not even looking at these market swings and just holding. I'm a little different. I tend to try to brace for these things because we see the news. If you watch this channel, you see the news every day, and you know the direction things are headed. We all knew this was coming, and anyone that was paying attention. But trillions vanish from 401k accounts in minutes. That's how they're putting it here over at the Mail. And so they're basically saying trillions were erased. And obviously, most of these 401ks are the average person, the average working person, just trying to hopefully save up enough to retire one day. But it's looking like retirement's becoming more and more of a pipe dream for more people, for most people now. And we've got people even in their 30s and 40s that are in the workforce and have been in the workforce for 10, 15, 20 years, and they're looking 10, 20 years down the road to retirement, and they're saying, wow, I've got all this debt, the student loan debt. If they got a mortgage, they're probably at least $300,000 to $400,000 under on a mortgage, and they're looking at their job and they're saying, wow, is this going to pan out? Will my 401k actually even be there for me? Will retirement be there for me as far as any sort of social security with all the cuts right now? There's people out there holding signs as I speak, holding signs about social security is going to be wiped out, right? So even if you think it's not a threat or it's not going to happen, there's a lot of panic out there. A lot of people are thinking the worst case scenario might actually happen. And we've got the whole debt forgiveness thing was flipped upside down here recently. A lot of people were whiplashed because of that and put into a state of shock. And here's just one story out of millions of stories like this here. A 35-year-old woman was 29 months away from getting her $247,000 in student loan debt forgiven. Now she's stuck because they reversed everything. Imagine $247,000 in student loan debt. How much is her mortgage? I mean, probably couldn't even buy a house. Probably can't even rent anywhere with that unless she got a doctor. She's a doctor or some high-paying job. Many student loan borrowers are experiencing challenges to their timeline and debt forgiveness. And here's someone had about 2.5 years left before her $247,000 federal student loan balance would be excused under the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. But for many months, she's been frozen on her timeline to this relief. Quote, "We're not getting credit," she said. This time has been devastating. So there were many people out there banking on getting that loan debt forgiven. And some of them went out and bought houses because they just had it all priced in that they were going to erase this debt over here, and now they're not so lucky. So how many of these people bought houses or became more debt burdened because they thought that debt was going to be erased, and now they've got to pay the piper? And we covered the news just maybe 4 or 5 days ago that a record number of people now are using their tax returns just to pay off debt and to pay for essentials like rent and utilities. So a combination of rent, paying off essentials like utilities, and paying off debt is now most of what these people are paying with their tax refunds, right? So that's a pretty sad story. It used to be most people would go out with their tax refund if you were lucky enough to get a refund. Most people would go out and maybe put a down payment on a car or do something nice, nice vacation. Some people put it away, but now we're seeing most people not able to put it away even if they want to because of all the other obligations and the debt. And I've said here many times, I think most of you agree, that these tariffs are not going to bring back many jobs because the cost of living is still too high here. For the most part, companies are not going to want to come back. Yes, there'll be a few, and they'll put them out in the news, making it look like there's a surge in manufacturing coming back to the U.S., but more and more media outlets I'm agreeing with. I mean, usually it used to be that I disagreed with most of the kind of the headlines or the mainstream talking points, but we've got barons out there saying the following: tariffs won't bring back manufacturing. What will they do to stocks? I think it's going to be a scare in the stock market and more weakness, but then I think it's going to be higher prices, and I don't think manufacturing is going to come back. And again, I hope I'm wrong on this, right? A lot of the stuff that I'm talking about here, I hope I'm wrong. But I don't see myself being wrong. Just using logistical and common sense, all right, logic. And I actually talked to a couple the other day during the course of my work day, and they told me that they went out and bought 2 cars, basically front loading in front of the tariffs. They thought prices were going to go up so high because of the tariffs. They bought 2 cars. Well, they traded in their old ones, so technically they got newer cars. And is that what a lot of people are doing? Are they expecting higher prices? The ones that are not prepared, are they going to be able to make it through this, right? With so many people already kind of skating the line between solvency and insolvency, right? So it's going to be interesting, folks. We're going to stay on top of it here for you. Please let me know what you think about all this down in comments, and we'll talk to you very soon, everybody. We'll see you here next time. Please make sure you are subscribed. Help keep this channel alive. Really appreciate it, folks. Thanks again. Keep stacking. Bye for now. Peace.